Welcome to this plenary session titled Decolonizing Energy, Palestine and Beyond. Can everyone hear me? Yes? Okay. My name is Sami, Hermez, and I'm the director of the Liberal Arts Program and associate professor of anthropology at Northwestern University in Qatar. So this panel is going to address some of the colonial legacies of energy systems in the global south, focusing on Palestine, but also beyond, as the title says, I guess sort of Middle East, North Africa, Europe especially. With us today we have three esteemed guests that I will introduce briefly. But I want to begin by just saying, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the genocidal acts and war and genocide in Gaza that's going on in the backdrop of this conference and what's going on. And in some ways, it's unbelievable, unimaginable, but somehow I think to many of us maybe not surprising because it is baked into the ideology of Zionism from before the foundations of the Israeli state. And I think that is something that we have to sort of recognize. And I also wanted to just mention Gaza because, whether it comes up in our discussion today, given that we're talking about larger issues or not, but to keep in mind the sort of the destruction and the sort of, I guess, war pollution that will be left behind in the Gaza Strip for people to who will have to sort of live with that for years to come. So I'll briefly introduce our three guests, and then I'm going to ask a general question. We'll have a conversation, and then if there's time, I might ask a follow-up question and then open it up to the audience. I'm going to introduce them in the order that they're sitting here today. So first, Dr. Mazin Qumsiyeh teaches and does research at Bethlehem and Birzeit universities. He is the founder and volunteer director of the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability at Bethlehem University. He has published over 150 scientific papers and several books on topics ranging from cultural heritage to human rights to biodiversity conservation to cancer. He has also published hundreds of articles and letters to the editor, and he serves on the board of a number of Palestinian youth and service organizations and oversees many projects related to the sustainability of human and natural communities. Then next we have Dr. Dajani, who's currently a fellow in environment at the Geography and Environment Department at LSE. Previously, she held the position of Senior Research Associate at the Lancaster Environment Center, Lancaster University. She's worked on projects involving groundwater sustainability and governance and others that dealt with water issues in contested and politicized transboundary river basins. She has published papers in political geography, antipode, environment and planning E, and water alternatives. And she's also published many policy briefs on water and climate change politics. And last but not least, we have Dr. Noura Alkhalili, who is an assistant professor in human geography at the Department of Geography, Planning and Environment at Radboud University in the Netherlands. She does research on renewable energy transitions in North Africa, green extractivism, as well as looks at decolonial and anti-colonial theories and works at the intersection of critical and political geography, urban studies, and settler colonial studies. And before I open up the conversation, I do have an admission to make that I was telling Mazin just a minute ago that we met more than, I won't say the number of years ago, back in the 90s, when I was still an undergraduate student at Duke University. And we met once, and it's had an impact on me ever since. For many years, I still remember that encounter, and it's kind of like a boy's dream that I'm sharing a panel with you now. And so I want to thank the the organizers of this conference for inviting me, at not knowing this little history. And yeah, so anyway, I wanted to kind of share this publicly. So I'll begin with a broad a question for the three of you. So I'd like you to tell us here today of your experiences in activism and research, or from your experiences of activism and research, how you see the relationship between energy, ecology, and Zionist settler colonialism. And you can think of this whether historical or even thinking of specific moments in history, or today, the current moment. But so. Another way of maybe asking this is how you would address the question of Palestine through the perspective of energy or ecology colonialism. So thinking in these kind of terms.
Thank you very much. Is this working? Yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for coming, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me. It's my first trip to Qatar. Hopefully it'll be beginning of a lot of collaborations, and I'll be speaking at another university here, Hamad bin Khalifa, tomorrow. So it's an honor to be here, and thank you very much, and thanks for arranging nice weather also for us. Now, sometimes in these conferences, I feel like the Far Side cartoon that the child raises his hand and says, "Teacher, teacher, may I be excused? My brain is full." So I feel sometimes that we are inundated with information. I'll try to make it rather simple for you. Actually, the world is not very complicated. They try to make the world complicated for us, but it's really about one word, which is greed. There are some people who are interested in gathering it all and denying millions of people basic living conditions. This is evident now, as you see in Gaza, 2.3 million people. 2/3 of them are refugees from 1948, and they are actually being killed in mass and denied food and water and medicine and fuel and energy and electricity, everything that makes life livable, and many are dying now of diseases. For what? What is the purpose of this? It's very simple. It's about resources and power and greed. And off the coast of Gaza, there's 1 trillion cubic feet of gas that Israel wants. Israel also wants to create an alternative to the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative that goes from Asia to Europe through Iran and Turkey. And for that, it will pass through our region, through Palestine. And this is what they want. And they say it will go through United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, with railroad tracks, through Jordan, Eilat, and then maybe another canal that competes with the Suez Canal that's going to be called Ben Gurion Canal from Eilat to the Mediterranean coast. Well, there is a small obstacle, which is the Palestinian people that's standing in the way, and so we have to remove them. It's as simple as that. And we have to remove the Palestinians, the remaining Palestinians from Gaza to the Sinai, and we have to remove the remaining Palestinians of the West Bank to Jordan. This is all about greed and about geopolitics that is unfortunately results in the killing of people. 8,000 children so far in less than 2 months. This is the reality. Now, in this context, what is, you go back, it is not a new thing. It didn't start 2 months ago. The massacre started in 1948. My mother's best friend in school was killed with her students at Dar Yassin. Her name is Hayab al-Bisi. And they were, both my mother and her were 18 years old at the time. So this is ongoing for 75 years. Israel is also geopolitically in a position that maybe you don't know how influential they are. Most of the phones we carry, like this phone, have now Pegasus Israeli spyware on it, and they don't have to have physical access to your phone. They can get the information from it through the Pegasus software, and they sell their weapons, which are warfare is no longer, by the way, warfare of countries like Second World War or Korean War or anything else. The world war now is basically a war on people. This is how wars are fought. And Israel sells itself globally as the best at this, because they have 75 years of killing Palestinians and getting away with it. They sell their weapons now. Israel is actually competing with the US in terms of weapons sales. Israel sells to 190 countries, even countries the US does not sell weapons to, like Myanmar, which oppresses the Rohingya. Israel sells weapons to them. 190 countries of a total of 194 countries in the world now buy weapons from Israel. What are these weapons? Security. Most of them are security-related weapons. Spy technology, surveillance technology, biometrics. This is all Israeli repackaged American products that they sell to our countries to help basically fight people. This is all. And this is the structure that was created over 75 years in a very methodical way. This structure is not sustainable, of course. Environmentally, it's not sustainable. I just submitted this morning a research paper with 117 references in it about the impact of wars on the environment. White phosphorus, depleted uranium, surveillance technology, you know, the wavelengths that they use for monitoring our phones and how they cause cancers. This is the research I do. My background is medical genetics also. And medical genetics, we understand these things more. But my background is also in biodiversity, and my first degree, PhD degree, was in biology and environment. And what you see is a devastating impact on the environment of colonization and of oppression and of this greed, as I say, is the key underlying force here is greed. So when Israel diverted the waters of the Jordan River from Lake Tiberias to the west, Jordan River used to be a river, now it's no longer a river. It dropped from 1,650 million cubic meters per year to now only 20 million cubic meters per year. It's barely a stream you can walk across. This was devastating to the environment. There is uprooting of millions of trees in our country, in historic Palestine, thanks to the military-industrial complex that Israel created. I could speak endlessly about these environmental challenges, but I'm sure Sami is going to harass me about the time.
We'll come
so
back
I
to
should
it,
stop here and we'll talk some more later.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mona, would you like to take it?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the organizers of the really important conference. And I wanted to kind of follow up from Mazin's really powerful intervention to speak about, the realities that we actually are witnessing in the besieged Gaza Strip are part of a very structural violence that is set in place. And I wanted to kind of take a bit of a historical perspective on this structural violence by looking at infrastructure in particular. And then I'll bring examples of energy infrastructure and how that infrastructural violence that is perpetrated by the settler colonial state of Israel is subjugated against Palestinian bodies, Palestinian lives, and Palestinian lands. And it all is about replacing, erasure, and denial of a Palestinian existence on that land. So if you want to start with the first layer of this infrastructural violence that Israel has been committing against land, people, and landscapes, that violence meant erasure of the Palestinian people as indigenous people of the land. That meant transforming their landscapes completely, that it has become unrecognizable for those who managed to stay behind, like the population, the Palestinians who live in Gaza today, like all of us, all across the Palestinian fragmented geographies. So we have to understand when we speak about this infrastructural violence, especially in the era we live in the times we live in of climate crises, the compounded climate crises, we have to understand that for indigenous populations such as Palestinians, the environmental change that has been inflicted by first colonialism, by British colonialism, has been further compounded with this environmental change has been inflicted on us by the settler colonial state and is now intensifying today under climate change. And this is kind of also following the work of indigenous scholars in the North America, like Kyle White, who has talking about kind of the existential coloniality of today's world we live in. What I see, or what I can frame in terms of like energy aspect of this infrastructural violence, I feel like this is a bit of hijacking of energy worlds that could have existed under a Palestinian world. So Israel has hijacked our energy world. It has hijacked our potential to develop our energy resources and has first erased the population, then transformed the landscapes through hydropower projects, through kind of a domination over and hegemony over energy infrastructure development and electrification of Palestine. I know that there are a lot of scholars who have worked on it. Some of them were meant to be here but couldn't. So it has kind of positioned itself, Israel, as this energy producer. So that world of energy and electrification and modernization was only limited to the settler colony. And the Palestinians, the ones that have remained, were seen to be as mere users, maybe. People that can be used people who can pay for these services, but never agents of change, never agents of production of that energy. So this is what remaining Palestinians were reduced to. So this set the stages actually for Israeli further control and domination over our energy resources, our water resources, and our environment in general. So there has been also another layer of infrastructural violence in its weaponization. So Israel uses water and energy that it controls completely and hegemonically to further inflict harm on Palestinians. We see it very evidently with what's going on in the besieged Gaza Strip. They have been like controlling every aspect of life in Gaza, life and death in Gaza. But we have seen how Israeli war generals at the start of this bloody assault who have said, we are going to close the tap on Gaza, we're going to cut fuel, water, electricity. And imagine the level of power, the level of violence that power has to decide to cut 2.2 million Palestinians from their energy source. So Israel has been exercising that full control over our energy sources. At the same time, in a parallel and very equally violent manner, the international community has moved us and has made our geographies into humanitarian geographies. The Gaza Strip is considered to be a humanitarian geography. There's a humanitarian crisis which actually compels the international agencies to come in to do the work that the Israel as an occupying force should be doing. So they do that work for them. They build the infrastructure, including energy and power generation, only to be destroyed. Assault after assault, year after year. Those infrastructures, again, that I find them also inherently violent as well, because they come with this idea of first a colonial legacy of international aid agencies and superpowers coming in to build infrastructure that are deemed to be destroyed, that are deemed to be completely erased, because the settler colonial system wants that violence to continue happening. And I just wanted to say quickly, but I can come back to it later, that another layer of this infrastructural violence, and when Israel as well promotes itself to be a startup nation, promotes its technologies to be transferred and exported as a source of successful infrastructures. But what they do is actually exacerbate existing injustices in different parts of the world, whether in the African continent, whether in South America, whether in Southeast Asia, where we see privatization, commodification coming in with that transfer of Israeli technologies to the part of the world, at the detriment, of course, of local marginalized communities, indigenous communities, and popular struggle for energy justice and energy equity. So from the heartland, from Palestine, we see it very evidently, and we see also in other places occupied, like the occupied Golan Heights where I work, where Israel also is trying to actually reduce its emissions, and that is being done on occupied land. It's being done on the occupied Golan Heights with wind energy projects. It's being done in the occupied West Bank through also large-scale solar panels. So that exposes, again, the violence embedded in technologies, in knowledges and infrastructure. So when we talk today about climate change and addressing climate change through green energy, we have to understand the inherent colonial legacy of that energy. And I'll continue. I'll have a lot to say, but I'll also continue later.
Can you? Oh, yeah. So, hi everyone, and thank you, Muna. And can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Muna and Mazin. So, I think I would like to talk about the nexus of energy, ecology, and settler colonialism by stretching a bit beyond Palestine. And I would like to talk a bit about North Africa and its energy relationships to Europe, and the Moroccan settler colonial project in occupied Western Sahara. And these are two intertwined layers. So here I'm looking at Europe as a European energy empire in light of the war in Ukraine and Europe's decoupling with Russian energy supplies in order to sustain its energy security and its European Green Deal. So they are seeking to create all these sort of partnerships and agreements with other contexts. And so here we're talking about energy export, green extractivism, energy diplomacy through these partnerships, and infrastructure which is embedded in coloniality. So I'm trying to kind of, in my work now, looking at these tentacles of the European Union that is stretching towards non-EU, what we call as green sacrifice zones, in order to be providers of this renewable energy and to sustain its energy imperialism. And so here, for example, the current Moroccan energy partnership with Europe that has been created in order to export renewable energy and green gas. And here, that means that there's a sort of further enclosures on communal lands in deserts, or fortifying the illegal occupation of occupied Western Sahara and further enhancing its settler colonial project there by bombarding the illegally occupied Western Saharan lands with wind farms, solar power plants, all at the expense of the Sahrawis and their struggle for self-determination and liberation. So, and another example in relation to Palestine that both Muna and Mazin mentioned is Gaza. So what's happening now in Gaza is settler colonialism at play at full speed. Its main aim is to destroy, to replace, and to eliminate the remaining indigenous Palestinians, all that for the sake of the resources, natural gas, because Europe has just signed an agreement with Egypt and Israel in order to export to Europe natural gas. So that's another perspective of like how energy, ecology, and settler colonialism are all intertwined, whether it's in Palestine, occupied Western Sahara. So these are all these zones that are being sacrificed for the sake of sustaining Europe's security, energy security, and ongoing imperialism, all of that is being created on unequal power relations, embedded in colonial legacies, ongoing settler colonialism. So I'll stop here. Maybe I can speak later more about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Noura. Thank you all. I think the last point you were making sort of reminds me that this is these settler colonies are very much extensions of Europe in a way. Even sort of the Moroccan case is for sort of, as you were saying, sort of European security guarantees and European energy, and so I mean that connection is never lost. So these we talk about neo-colonial, but you kind of see that operating in that context. Mazin, I wanted to return back to you. And kind of maybe picking up from where you left off, because I know you've been a long-time activist for several decades on the eco front, right? Eco activism and other fronts as well. And I'm curious, if you to ask you how you see things have changed, maybe how the present moment or present years are different. Yeah, I think sort of that process and how that settler colonialism maybe is playing.
I mean, I think there has been always the struggle that I mentioned between the few individuals who have agendas of greed that are transcending and suppressing native indigenous people, whether it's in the Amazon, whether it's the Aztecs, whether it's people in Myanmar, and people who profit from destroying people. I mean, there's an exhibit here about slavery and the economies of slavery, and I think it's a very effective exhibit that illustrates this notion of benefiting from the miseries of so many people. So it has always been that struggle. I think what's unique now is this interconnectedness, that the fact that I'm able to get online and speak to anybody in the world is very unusual. The genocide that's happening in Gaza is not unusual historically. I mean, there were genocides of the Congolese people by the Belgians. There was the Armenian genocide. There was the genocide that happened in the Second World War, the Holocaust, Armenia, Jews, others. There's genocides all over the world, hundreds of them you could not count. But this is very unusual because of its connectivity. You could actually get on Al Jazeera live, which is out of Qatar here, and watch it happening visually as you see it. This is unprecedented in world history, that you see a genocide happening in real life, in real time. And anybody can see it, and people even recording their own deaths. I've seen videos of people recording their own deaths. So this is very unprecedented. The second thing that's kind of unique about this genocide is that it's happening with the support of the Western governments and the clear hypocrisy of what's called international law, international order, all these things that were created after the Second World War. This is unprecedented that you have so many governments in the West against, by the way, the wishes of their own people, but nevertheless, because of the Israel lobby in those countries, the Zionist lobbies, that they are supporting this genocide and cheering it on actually and saying, go do more of it. We can talk about this negative aspect of it, but at the same time, this connectivity, again, of our connectivity, you saw the mass mobilizations of millions of people around the world. And this mass mobilization is what I have predicted would happen about 20 years ago. I wrote this in my book, Sharing the Land of Canaan, and then I reiterated it in another book called Popular Resistance in Palestine, subtitled The History of Hope and Empowerment, where I speak about the power of the people to change their own circumstances around the world. And perhaps the third negative point that one could talk about is the aspect of the same aspect that allows Israel to get away with a lot of what they do is also the same aspect that allows us to challenge this. So globally, that aspect is connectivity. And connectivity allows us, I mean, I looked at the numbers. On 13 October, actually, 65% of posts on social media were pro-Palestinian and 35% were pro-Israeli. The numbers within 1 month, in the end of November, the numbers were 95% pro-Palestinian and only 5% pro-Israeli on social media like Telegram, Instagram, TikToks, X, etc. And this is what young people, by the way, are doing nowadays, not emails even. This is unprecedented, and it gives us an opportunity for changing things for the benefit of humanity and to protect our environment and protect people's lives, sustainability. My institute that Jesse and I, my wife, who's here, and I, we donated our own money to it, $250,000 to get it started, is about sustainability of people and sustainability of nature. And you cannot have sustainability of people without sustainability of nature. And so it is very important that we work, all of us, on environmental issues. I'm sorry to say the COP28 was a disaster, really did not do what it needs to do. But it's similar to the previous 27 COPs, as Greta Thunberg said, they go blah, 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 you know? We need to change our system, our economies, everything, so that we have sustainability. Sorry if I...
No, because I actually wanted to jump in because my question to Muna was actually on Greta Thunberg. I wanted to sort of ask you, you know, I'm sure you've all heard that, you know, she came out in support of Palestine at a recent climate justice event, and you heard claps and boos. And, you know, I guess I wanted to get your thoughts as someone who's worked on some of these issues on, you know, whether this might split the climate movement, what this says about the climate movement, and what do the boos and claps signify about the movement overall? You know, how do you see this movement's politics, maybe around the notion of climate apartheid?
What did she say again? What was her quote? No climate justice in occupied land?
Yeah,
no something like climate justice on occupied land. I think, yeah, it has been really interesting, and I think it signifies a bit of an important shift in the discourse around climate activism in the West, because a lot of time I would characterize that activism as being very much based on like Western conceptualization and understanding of what climate change is and how can it be addressed. So it is far away from, let's say, what communities that are living under ongoing settler colonial violence, or communities that are undergoing, you know, the enduring colonial aspects of lives, let's say in Latin America and other parts of the world. So it has been a bit distant. Like all of this activism around climate change has been produced in English. All our knowledge production about climate change are produced in English for a certain audience. And I think there has been a big kind of gap between that understanding of climate change and how to address it. Usually the solution also by this type of climate activism that is based in the West, it's all around, you know, market-based mechanisms. It's all around techno-managerial solutions. It doesn't really address issues of justice because it is a global issue, and framing it as such is giving us all equal responsibilities for it. So it's saying people in Palestine are equally responsible for action on climate change, just like somebody, privileged white person in the heart of Europe. So these issues of injustice are rarely discussed in that climate activism circles, but I think what Greta did, which beforehand I didn't hear her say, but I think this time around kind of exposed that coloniality that is embedded in the thinking around climate change, you know? So she's saying something that should be at the heart of the climate justice movement, you know, no climate justice on occupied land. Israel is actually promoting itself as a green startup nation because it is exploiting the resources of Palestinians. It has been ethnically cleansing Palestinians and continues to do so in front of the eyes of the world because of energy, you know? So that kind of embedded colonial legacy and character of Israel is very much exposed. The occupied Golan Heights is one site, I'm just going to mention it quickly, that is totally forgotten, and me and Noura have worked on comparing, you know, the occupied Golan Heights with occupied Western Sahara in terms how both these geographies are re-emerging as sites of green extractivism. So Israel is using the altitude and the geography of the Golan Heights to produce wind energy, a source of clean energy, to reduce its emissions so that it can meet the commitments it has committed to. So we can see here that you cannot separate the rights of indigenous population, their right to resourcehood, their right to be on their land, their right to self-determination from the climate justice movement. And this is where we come as Palestinians and other nations that speak of climate justice from that level that climate justice for us is an existential right for us to exist on our land, and for energy justice to be truly just. It's not about distributing energy gains and reducing energy harms in equal ways, but it's also about reclaiming rights to resources. And that, I think, the title of the panel is about decolonizing energy. How do we decolonize energy, but also how do we decolonize the way we speak about it and the way we produce knowledge about it and the way we fight for it, I think, is an important aspect.
Thank you. Noura, sort of picking up from there on the sort of greenwashing, I wanted to see if you could tell us a little bit about this notion of ecological modernization that you've written about. I guess, in a sense, how does the ecology get used to greenwash? You know, I was sort of reminded in this kind of greenwashing after October 7, there was this photo that went around by Zionists where they kind of, you see photos of Gaza that are ultra modern with parks and really completely, you know, they've erased Gaza and made it into this like large park, essentially it's very eco-friendly looking Gaza, and so just kind of reminded me how, or just to think about how colonial regimes also use the ecology in these ways to greenwash or modernize.
Yeah, so I mean, you asked me about ecological modernization. So, well, just to say briefly, it's a concept that assumes that this green energy transition can occur in the confines of capitalism, where economic growth can happen together with preserving the environment. And of course, the downsides of this concept that me and Muna, in our work, we called it the enduring coloniality of ecological modernization, that it completely ignores the role of imperialism, capitalism, ongoing settler colonialism, and the colonial legacies in framing, in talking about this current environmental crisis that we are witnessing. And it also ignores that these environmental injustices that certain populations are extremely that they are completely suffering from is because of this current structure that is embedded within capitalism, racism, inequalities, and patriarchal capitalism. And that also limits like climate actions to happen from a very technocratic perspective, so that if we bombard like deserts or these marginal lands or these unimportant territories where there are like occupations with wind farms or solar power plants, we're solving this climate crisis. So it's becoming very neoliberal, market-based, top-down approach and centralized, while renewables could be used in a very democratic, decentralized way where we could empower communities, all to preserve capitalism. So that's more on ecological modernization and why we look at it as an enduring like coloniality. And of course, when these renewable energy transitions are being approached or conducted through an eco-modernist approach, we are further ignoring and like allowing for this renewable energy development to happen usually on indigenous territories, allowing for further land enclosures, common land enclosures, mainly in deserts or other locations, and to further allow for the empowering of these illegal occupations and to destroy fragile ecosystems. So all that is embedded in an enduring colonial environmental narrative that labels land as underdeveloped or misused, and it should be grabbed for saving the planet and to create like green energy. And in relation to the second part where you talked about how greenwashing and the erasure of indigenous land or like specific landscapes, I mean, this is not something new that we are witnessing. All this is like the old colonial gaze on, like if I look at the Middle East and North Africa, the way that they looked at the landscape in this region as underdeveloped or very exotic or strange or defective. So it has to be improved in comparison to Europe's like normal and productive landscape. So there should be a sort of Western intervention to improve it, restore it, and also to legitimize the dispossession of these territories and the control of the inhabitants, the indigenous inhabitants there. And so, yeah, so.
A round of applause again. Thank you very much.